We start with LSU basketball and resume talk. As we say, there's one show every week that we're not looking back at a game or forward to another, and that's probably the best time to kind of dive into the numbers, and we'll be doing that a lot over the next 2 weeks as LSU finishes these things up, and we'll see where they land on Selection Sunday. I'm confident telling you one thing, and I've told you this now for a week. LSU is in the NCAA Tournament. I can't find a scenario that would drop them out. I did hear something yesterday on Matt Moscona's show that had me, I don't know if taken aback. I don't know if surprised. I don't know if uninformed. That might be a word to use. Because yesterday, Jerry Palm was on Matt Moscona's show and said the net rankings are not a decisive factor. He said what the net rankings are to essentially determine to your opponents what you are, as opposed to what the selection committee believes that you are. So LSU's 16 in the net doesn't necessarily do LSU any good. Who it's good for are the teams that LSU has lost to on a home floor. You're a quad one win. You're helping them out by having good metrics. The other part of this is that LSU's numbers are looking as good as they do because the non-conference effort was so strong against teams that have won a lot of games. Your Liberties, your Louisiana Techs, your Ohios, your Wake Forests, those types of games bode well for LSU. So that's a roundabout way of saying that we can't necessarily take the net, according to Jerry Palm, which I'm going to take his word for it. He does a really good job and certainly knows more than me. The fact that LSU's net is 16 isn't necessarily a huge feather on their cap. It just means that all the work that they've done and the rest of these metrics being the quadrants have kind of put them there, and that's what's more important. Your 5-7 record against quad 1, your 4-1 record against quad 2, 6-1 against quad 3, and 5-0 against quad 4. So LSU's resume, as I put it, Jeremy, to this point is, if not impressive, it's clean. So it's not the most flashy thing you've ever seen, but your losses are in quad 1 outside of a couple, one in quad 2, one in quad 3, nothing bad in quad 4, and it's not like you've gone 17-0 in quad 4, you're only 5-0 there. So it's a clean resume if it's not the most impressive thing we've ever seen.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of have I tend to disagree with that. I know he specializes in it, but I think for me, I would have to see a team that's ranked as highly as LSU is in the net not make the tournament. Otherwise, and what's the point of doing the whole thing? Because if you're ranked that high, you have the quad 1 wins, you don't have a ton of quad 4 losses. How do they make that argument or that statement that, hey, you're ranked this high in the net, you do have these wins, but you still don't make the cut? I just find I kind of have to disagree with that.
I was with you there until this is kind of the way that he would describe that. He would tell you that Houston is a 4 in the net, which would have them as a 1 seed. They're more likely a 5 seed to this point. So LSU being a 16 in the net, which would technically be a 4 seed, they're not a 4. They're closer to a 6 or a 7. So that's kind of the point he's making, is that you can't necessarily put too much correlation between where you are in the net and where you would be on the seed line. I think the point being, your resume being what it is, and LSU's numbers looking as good as they do on paper are intentional, but they're not going to necessarily look at a team and compare LSU to another team and say, oh, your net is 14 spots better, you're better. They would more so look at, oh, you have 5 quad 1 wins and they only have 2, or you didn't do a bunch of your work in quad 4. So what I'm saying is that those things I'm telling you, the 5 quad 1 wins and only having 4 games in quad 4, that helps your net. So that, in a sense, is saying the same thing, but it's not a direct correlation is kind of what he's saying. Yeah. So here's some interesting stuff. And when I look at this is not I wouldn't sign off on this because I did not look through every single team. But I did go far enough to where I feel pretty good about it. And there could be a glaring misstep, but the point of the discussion remains. LSU's best wins this year are against number 5 in the net, Kentucky, and number 8 in the net, Tennessee. That is 2, obviously, top 10 wins. Bama's got 4. They beat Gonzaga, Houston, Tennessee, and Baylor. That's the most I can find. Kentucky beat Kansas and Tennessee. Texas beat Kansas and Tennessee. And Tennessee beat Arizona and Kentucky. So that's 2 as well. So what I can find, there are 2 other teams with 2 top 10 wins, and then you got Alabama that's got 4. That to me is another feather in LSU's cap. Say, hey, I mean, we've been talking about those 2 wins the whole time, but they are top 10 wins. And LSU has a lot of losses, but they're in the high quadrants, and they've got a couple of impressive wins. The key thing to remember when we're talking about seeding, which we'll do most days moving forward as we kind of track what teams win and lose, every team that LSU is being grouped with, whether it's on the 7 line, 8 line if it falls that far, the 6 line, the 5 line, wherever, every team that you get compared to has some significant faults.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you've dropped to where you are. And the fact of the matter is that Joe Lunardi's got LSU as a 6. Bracket Matrix has LSU as a 6. CBS Sports has LSU as a 7. And Andy Katz has LSU as a 7. I don't need to go through 14 of them, but basically the consensus is you're right there. Bracket Matrix at LSU is the last 6 seed. Lunardi still got him as a 6. You got a couple 7s. That's where you are to this point. Does that surprise you to hear that?
Yeah, it does. It does, especially to this point of the season. When you've had the amount of losses you've had in the SEC, losing to some really bad teams at certain points in the season, it's very shocking that they're that high in the NCAA tournament rankings right now. But I think, like you just said, when you do have those wins, I think if you scrap that Kentucky win out and you scrap that Tennessee out, now you're looking at a team that's definitely not going to make the tournament. But with those wins and just the damage you did to start the season, I think that gave you enough cushion for you to have a little landing spot here, and I think that's why they have them ranked so highly right now.
Here's the deal, and this is the whole point of the conversation was to come to this point. You've got 2 games in front of you this week. You are at Arkansas, and you're home against Alabama. This week, something you do from here to the second week in the NCAA tournament, so from this point right here to the Sweet 16, something you do has got to be very difficult. And you can make something a little bit easier. My plan would be to do the difficult stuff this week. Go to Bud Walton and win. Win a home game against Alabama. At that point, you are looking dead in the face at a 5 with a chance to go to Tampa and cement yourself as a 5 seed, maybe even a 4 if you go nuts. Okay, that's really hard to do. The way this team has played over the last 2 months, I certainly would not bet on them to do that, but they could. And if you're a 5 or a 4, you've got a real chance to make it to the second weekend. A 5 seed plays a 12 and then a 4. And it's possible that you could play a 12 and then a 13. A 4 seed obviously plays a 13, then a 5. That would be the easier part as opposed to winning these 2 games. One on the road, one against the Bama team that can play really well. Or the easy part this week would be to lose 2 games. You could lose 2 games, very, very possible. Then the hard part would have to be in the NCAA tournament. You'd be an 8 or a 9. You'd have to play a 50-50 game, and then you'd play a 1 seed, and you'd probably be toast. And that'd probably be the hardest assignment of them all. So it's unlikely for LSU to win both these games this week. Mm-hmm. But, man, you could make your life a lot easier in the NCAA tournament if you were to do it. That's the point we've gotten to. 3 weeks ago, I said there's no sense in saying they're going to win this one, lose this one, win this one, and I wasn't going to do that. And we didn't for 2 weeks. Now you're there. Mm-hmm. There's 2 games left, and then you go to Tampa. And there's probably people listening and going, why would you even insinuate that a team that lost 6 of 7, just lost to South Carolina, they just came off a win against a terrible Missouri team, would have any chance to go to Bud Walton and win? I don't think they're going to win tomorrow. But you could. They could beat them. Vanderbilt went in there and won. So it can be done. But that's the point you're reaching. And the entire thesis of this whole thing in early January was it's time to make a run at this thing into the second weekend. Let's get a great seed and not have to deal with anybody really difficult right out of the chute. You had a chance. You let it falter, but it's still right there close to you if you can get it done. I mean, would you – we talked to John Brady about it yesterday. Would you tell your team that entering this week?
I don't like to do that. That's just not the way I've been in sports since I was 8 years old, and it's a cliche for a reason. You got to focus on the opponent in front of you, especially – if you find yourself up, 10, 12 points against Arkansas on the road, and you're like, okay, we got this one in the bag. Let's focus on beating Alabama. Like, we got this one. And then that's when things kind of slip away. So if I'm them, I'm taking it 1 game at a time. You can't even get to Alabama until you handle business up in Bud Walton. So I'm going to refrain from that right now. I think for them, they got to focus on this one because if they do, it's a huge opportunity for them. Last time we played Arkansas at home, we didn't have Xavier Pinson at the point guard position, and games, really have to, put the team on his back as far as that go. And we know that's probably not where he's best suited as a player for this team. So I think with Xavier being back for both of these games, he missed the first game against Alabama and Arkansas. So I think getting him back into this lineup, I think it gives you a lot more chance to win both of these games.
I think the SEC is going to help LSU for the first time in a while. When you look at the strength of the conference, you've got 6 top 25 net teams. Kentucky's 5, Tennessee's 8, Auburn's 11, LSU is 16, Alabama's 22, and Arkansas is 23. Of the Power 6 in basketball, that's the most. The SEC's 6. The Big 10 has 5, the Big 12 has 4, the Big East has 3, the Pac-12 has 2, and the ACC just has 1. So while I think LSU has been underseeded a couple times in the recent past, maybe the league gets a little bit of a nod. I personally, as I look at this, find it hard to believe that LSU is on the 6th line right now the way they've played the last 2 months. Maybe you get a little bit of a hat tip because Pinson get down. I don't think so. Everybody's had to deal with injuries to this point. If you haven't, you're exceptionally lucky and an outlier. So I think you're closer to the 7 line at this point. And that's an easy fall back to 8, 9, 10 where you do not want to be. So it's an interesting week. It's fun that we get to have this conversation. It's disappointing that it's not kind of steering towards the 2 or 3 line like we'd like, but you're right there in the mix, which is where LSU's made a habit of being.
Thanks so much for watching Hunt Hill on YouTube.
Now do us a favor. Hit the red subscribe button below and throw us a like. We'll see you next time.